So hello and welcome to today's Austrian Wine Time Masterclass with Gernot Heinrich. My name is Antoinette Londejean from Cork and Fork in Washington, D.C. We are a premium wine store founded by a multi-generational flying winemaker originally from Champagne, France. I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Heinrich Winery. Gernot and Heike Heinrich founded their winery in 1990 with just 1 hectare and have steadily grown to 90 hectares today. Heinrich was one of the first in the region to transition from simple white wines to high-quality reds in the early 1990s and became famous for powerful red blends. In recent years, the focus turned to a line of wines produced with minimal intervention in the cellar. Heinrich converted to biodynamics in 2006 and is a member of Respekt, a certifying body for biodynamic viticulture in Austria. Heinrich today is one of Austria's most innovative wine producers. For those joining us live, we'd love to hear from you. Place your questions in the Q&A and we'll get to them time allowing. Since our guest is joining us live from Austria quite a few hours ahead of us here in the States, we will move immediately into the presentation. Gernot, please introduce yourself and your beautiful winery.
Good evening from Austria. Thank you, Antoinette, for the invitation. I'm glad to be here. And I just want to introduce myself, Gernot Heinrich from Heike and Gernot Heinrich estate. And I would like to share some slides first to give you an impression where we are, how we are working, about our philosophy of winemaking, and about our soils and about biodynamics. And later on, we will have the opportunity to discuss some questions and to taste some wines. So this is the sign in front of our house. The winery is situated on the northeast side of the lake Neusiedler See, in the far east of Austria. So you can see Vienna here. Austria is in the central of Europe, close to the Hungarian border to the east, and to Czech Republic in the north, Slovenia in the south, and Italy. So a very central position. And this is a lake which has a great location here for wine growing, and the winery is situated on the northeast side of the lake in a small village, Gols. And yeah, some years ago, it was actually 2006 when we decided to do this kind of step over the lake, because we were so fascinated of these sites on the west side, which is called Leiterberg, which is the most eastern parts of the Austrian Alps. You could also say it's the beginning of the Austrian Alps in the most eastern point. And actually now we have 30 hectares on the northeast side and 60 hectares on the west side on the Leiterberg. So there was a big movement towards this west side lakes, west sides. What was so fascinating was this soil. You can see in this picture here is schist with a lot of silica in it. And the other type of soil is limestone. And these two major sites, we are now on the site Edelgraben, where we grow Blaufränkisch. And by the way, Blaufränkisch is the most grown grape variety in the winery. It covers about 50 hectares of the total wine growing area. So it's really the dominant grape variety. This is a vineyard called Edelgraben, and it's faced to the east. You can see the lake in the background. And in the position behind the vineyard, there is a big forest on top of the hill. And there is a strong influence on the mesoclimate. There is always cold air fleeting out of the forest, and has an influence on the ripening period. And the other type of soil is limestone. And as you can see in this picture here, it's only a small, let's say 30 centimeters of topsoil with humus. And then you can find this pure limestone. You find a lot of fossils in this soil when you're planting. And if you're planting the new wines, the young wines, they're rooting directly in this limestone. So you can imagine that they are having a hard life in the very beginning, but they're also expressing this pure terroir from the very beginning on. Yeah, this is so fascinating if you have this soil in your hand, and you can almost taste the saltiness of this limestone in the wine afterwards. This is a picture where you can see the fossil. By the way, this was when we planted a lot of vineyards beginning of 2008 on the Alter Berg, which is one of the two major sites and famous sites on the Leiter Berg. Another picture where you see how poor this soil is and how rocky it is, and but also a small content of clay, so that the water holding capacity is quite good. And if it comes to biodynamics, I think this is one of the major goals, that biodynamic is in living the microbiological life of soil, and only then the roots of the vines can take all the nutrients out of the soil. So the plant, actually the cover crops, are feeding the wine. Yeah, this is so fascinating that I took a lot of pictures, and this is really important for our style of winemaking. This is our little dog, Hummel, climbing up on Alter Berg, on limestone again. This is like chalk, so pure and white. And in this soil, you really need this rootstock, which is tolerant to calcium. And we are using Ferkal in most of the vineyards because it can stand this high content. Another view to the east, few kilometers away of the Hungarian border. So this is a really flat area on the east side, but quite hilly on the west side, on the Leiter Berg. This is a picture on Alter Berg, taking around harvest last year. And you can see there are cover crops all around, so we're not plowing the soil. And yeah, we're working with animals at the winery, so we are producing our own compost using the sheep manure, but also the cow manure. And yeah, my wife Heike is taking care of the sheep. She's really working with them every day and has a strong link to them. I think this is important, that you're living close to the animals, and they are implementing this, what we call astral forces, to the winery. And they are not shy, so they are really used to us. And all visitors who are coming to the winery, they are taking this this complexity in life. And if you're talking about biodynamics, it's always a holistic, a spiritual, an ethical, and an ecological approach to farming. Lots of animals around, chicken, and this is a picture of our compost, which is made of all the residues of the grapes. So it's a closed farm system, not so much input, but a lot of output. This is a Preparate 500, which is one of the two major field spray preparates in biodynamics. It's responsible for balancing processes in the soil. It's activating life forces and balancing activities. That's the compost with the compost preparate. So you can see the different compost preparates in the wooden box, and you're kind of doing some injections into the fresh compost. And in the end, spraying to the compost with valerian. This is dug up the cow manure preparate out of the soil after the winter month, because all the energy of the earth is in the soil. Again, Preparate 500, which we use for dynamization afterwards, and we're spraying in big drops on the soil. Yeah, and for these 90 hectares, we need a few horns filled with cow manure, but we're using also nettle tea and also horsetail tea for spraying, and doing these preparations in this big pot, 500-liter pot, fired with gas. Yeah, biodiversity is a big theme in biodynamics. You see really a wide range of wildlife. We are in the middle of a national park around the lake, and so you see a lot of birds. This is quite a rare bird usually, but lots of them here around. The bee eater, which is flying around in the vineyards. And this is a picture behind the winery in a vineyard called Salzberg. Wild deer and even hedgehog you can find. This was taken on Edelgraben last year, and also salamander on Edelgraben on schist soil. So this is really intact wildlife. And yeah, it's coming to cover crops. You can see that you're enhancing this life. You see these insects here. And if you're plowing, you're destroying life. And high diversity, you see clover, different types of clover, and also some other flowers here. This is Phacelia with bumblebee. That's how it will look like yeah, in a few weeks. Right now it's still cold, and it starts, yeah, the growing season, but and buds breaking right now quite late compared to other years. This ray in a young vineyard on Alteberg. Yeah, it's hand-picked. All the grapes are hand-picked, and you can see that we do a careful selection in the vineyard. This is a picture of Zweigelt. You can see that we use 4 or 5 bunches per vine. And that is a picture of Pinot Noir. Yeah, and all animals like to eat our grapes too. This is a picture of Blaufränkisch, how it should be. So we really prefer this small and loose bunches, small berries to achieve this natural concentration and complexity in taste in the end. So, and to get this type of grape, I think it's important to have this balance between growth and generative growth in the vineyard. Only a few 100 grams per vine in the vineyard. So we're talking about a very low yield. That means 1,500 to 2,000 for the top wines. Again, hand selection in the vineyard. This is Pinot Blanc, which is also in the part of the naked white, which we're tasting later. This is Chardonnay. Also perfect condition, so no rotten berries in between. And this is necessary if you want to work in this really natural way with spontaneous fermentation. You have to have a very clean material from outside. Yeah, we do a second sorting in the winery on a sorting belt, and yeah, 4 people, sometimes 8 people, depending on the material. And you can see this yellow stems. So this is perfect ripe Blaufränkisch, which we. In this case, this is classic Blaufränkisch vintage 18. And after the sorting belt, the grapes are falling directly into the fermentation vats in the cellar. So our cellar is built in 3 levels. In this case, we are filling the amphoras like that. So the grapes are sliding down into the fermentation vats or into the amphoras. And I like this style of individual working. So we're using a lot of small vats in the winery for selection of all the vineyards. Sometimes the upper part, the middle part, and the lower part, and different varieties. And you don't need that much technique because temperature is not going up in the amphoras. We're just touching them on top, just punch down sometimes a little bit to avoid oxidation. But in the end, doing less is more taste. And all these fermentation vats you can see here, the oak fermenters, they are also mobile. So we can drive them around and also drive them into the elevator. So we can go up and down in the winery with them even when they're full. Here you can see fermenting white wine in an amphora, quite full. And that's the way how we are pressing. So we are racking the wine off from the amphoras into barrels, also by gravity. And then we turn the rest into the basket. So this is the basket of the basket press. And then we do this, this gentle pressing afterwards. So it's very easy to empty them. And you just need a forklift to do this. And it even after fermentation, it looks fresh and very nice condition. Yeah, the must is very cloudy when you're doing this pressing process, and this is very important to protect the wine. So this this yeast, which is still in the wine, is protecting the wine against oxidation, and so we go to the cask very cloudy because this is very important to keep this natural reduction. This is a picture of Pinot Gris and Pinot Blanc. So you can see how close this relationship is. And this is after fermentation. So sometimes we do co-fermentation of Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris, and sometimes also Pinot Noir. Yeah, you can see the press, the basket press in the background. And again, this blend of Pinot Noir and Pinot Blanc here in the picture. In the first year, when we had only 5 amphoras, we did it in a manual way because we couldn't turn them. So that was quite difficult to empty them. We had a small student from Geisenheim, and she was climbing into the amphoras to get the mesh out of it after fermentation. Now here you can see the basket press with the hose going down to the cellar again. And everything happens by gravity. So this is a sieve we are using to empty the amphoras to get the juice or the wine out first. Yeah, punching down happens by hand, so it's a very traditional and simple way of working. You don't need any machines for that. Yeah, filling tanks and also the barrels with white wine in this case here. And by the way, naked white is fermented in this oval shaped casks. Meanwhile, we have about 20 of these casks with a size of 25 hectoliters. And yeah, we really enjoy doing this with a very long lees contact. And we are not racking during this time, during the aging process. So we stay on the full lees. We go very cloudy from the press into the casks, and we stay on the full lees without sulfur all the time. So there are no additive used at all, except a bit of sulfur for bottling sometimes. And yeah, the lees, which is always sedimented in the casks and in the amphoras, is really magic to the wine and very important. Sometimes it doesn't look that good, but the wine tastes good after a long lees contact. And there is a lot of interaction between the yeast and some amino acids go in solution again. And actually the wine is building freshness and acidity again while aging on the lees. Topping up the barrels also by hand. Another impression of the different colors of white wine grapes. So the left side here, it's Pinot Gris. So you can see it's getting quite dark after skin fermentation. And all these wines are naturally fermented and with the skin contact in amphoras. Yeah, observing, in this case, it means tasting and checking the amphoras is very important. We're also using ceramic eggs, and yeah, we will buy some more this series because I like this small neutral vessels, because if you have small barrels, there is always an influence, sometimes bad influence, sometimes too much oxidation, which I don't like. And in this ceramic eggs, the wine stays really fresh and shows a nice dynamic development. Obviously, I'm happy with this wine, yeah. Yeah, another 3 colors. We're using this ceramic bottle, by the way, for all the wines. We do a longer skin contact in the amphoras. A little bit of artwork in a winery, and the last pictures, a few impressions of the landscape out there. This is a picture taken from the east side of the lake to the west. So actually, you see the Leiterberg here in the background. And this picture I took 3 days ago, driving with a bike. Yeah, I hope this few slides could give you some impression how we are working in the winery. And yeah, I am open to answer some questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let's taste the wines. What do you say? We'll start with the naked white.
Yes. Naked white first. Oh, sorry. It's the 18 vintage, and I always recommend to shake the bottle before opening, because even in the bottle there are always some sediments. It's not that cloudy, but I prefer this little cloudiness to keep the wine fresh. And even 18 was really a hot and dry vintage. And if you do this long least contact in the cask, it keeps the wine fresh. And this is yeah, one of the secrets. And of course, the right picking time and the right canopy management. I think there are other parameters which are important. But what I like in these wines is this pureness and saltiness in the end. So all our wines are always dry. There is no residual sugar, because I don't like it in the wine, also for all the red wines. Yeah, some herbal notes, which are really nice. Yeah, very clean on the palate and very straight. And I think this is a wine which can age for another 5 to 10 years. Even we used very little sulfur for bottling, so it's a very low sulfur treatment. It's just to protect the wine for the bottling process. Sometimes I think it's more for our consciousness and to be on the safe side. But yeah, it helps a little bit, but it's not that important actually. The second wine is Zweigelt, vintage 16, and I'm really happy to have this yeah, riper vintage here, because it's already sold out in Austria. But 16 was a very good year, good quality. We had this late frost and lost about 40% of the crop. So this is the reason why this wine is coming more from the hilly sides. That means because the flat part was really destroyed in this spring frost. And typical for Austrian Zweigelt, so it's this nice cherry aroma. Yeah, very clear. And I don't like this oak treatment, this heavy oak treatment. So we prefer to age this wine in this big oak fermenters, 3,000 liter old oak, and a very slow development. And if you talk about slow food, there is also slow wine. So the slow ripening process, slow maturation in this big oak casks on the natural lees. Again, also for the red wines. So we're not filtering the red wines, same as the white wines. But of course, we do this sedimentation through this long aging process. So the wine comes very clear into the bottle. In this case, it's fermented in inox tanks, but also in these oak fermenters, and then aged for at least a year in these oak fermenters.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I do have a couple of questions for you. On your website, you have the quote, "Just as not everyone who sleeps dreams, not everyone who dreams is sleeping," by George Christoph Lichtenberg. What about this quote inspires you, and how does it define what you're doing at the winery?
Well, I'm not dreaming that much while I'm sleeping, so I'm more the daydreamer, and I think this also answers your question. I think it's important to have dreams, and this is also the link to the spiritual aspect of biodynamics, I think. And if dreams come true, I think this is the secret of happiness also, and an important matter. And yeah, it was a strong influence, of course, because we changed a lot of things during the last, let's say, 15 years, converting to biodynamics. And I mean, that there was a dream in the beginning, and that led us to this way of working. And even it was difficult sometimes. We had some heavy infections of downy mildew and frost, as I mentioned, and it was not easy. And we were learning a lot, but it was always keeping our way on this path.
You started farming biodynamically in 2006, and you just touched on the difficult aspects of farming biodynamically. Can you tell us a little bit about what the benefits are of biodynamic farming?
I mean, the reason why we made the decision in 2006 was we had the feeling of this imbalance in our vineyards. I mean, we were plowing before, and there was quite vigorous vines and big bunches, and of course we did this green harvest, but in the end I had a bad feeling about this way of working, and that was the reason why we were searching. And then we met this guy Andrew Laurent, who was a consultant at that time, and yeah, he inspired us a lot, and we were reading Rudolf Steiner together, and also with all the other colleagues from Respekt, with Fred Leumer from the Lower Austrian group, and with the Panobile group here. We started together with biodynamic working, and we shared experience. So there was a lot of exchange of experience, and everybody was very honest to each other. And so it was easier to work in that way then.
And we saw some amazing photos of the soils on the vineyard. They're absolutely incredible. Can you speak a little bit to the microclimates on the 90 hectares that you have? How do those different parcels vary?
There are 30 hectares here on the northeast side, which is the warmer and drier side of the lake, and the vineyards are faced to the south, and there is more sedimentary soil. So it's heating up a lot more than the vineyards do on the Leiterberg side, where the vineyards are faced to the east. So there is more shade in the afternoon. So just to give you an impression, we pick Blaufränkisch about 2 weeks later on the west side, even it's only 15 kilometers distance from here. There is such a big difference. And also the big forest on top of the hill on Leiterberg. We're talking about 4,000 hectares of forest. It's like air-conditioned cold air coming out of the vineyard of the forest all the time. So you can feel this cold air, and there is a major impact on the ripening period. So, for example, Blaufränkisch keeps much more acidity, and also the white wines like Chardonnay, which we use in the Chardonnay Leiterberg, but also in the naked white, keeps the acidity much better than here on the east side. So also due to the global warming, I think it was a good decision to kind of move to the other side. And yeah, my father was asking me 2006 if I'm crazy. Why do we need these vineyards on the other side of the lake? Because the farmer is always linked to his own piece of land. But I was very open-minded and so fascinated when we tasted. Actually, we tasted the grapes from 2 suppliers, and we made wine of these grapes. It was such a big difference in taste, and that was the reason why we discovered this region over there. And I think this is one of the best places in Austria to grow wine.
This is an interesting question. We've asked it before, and very often the response is that the soil chooses what varieties to plant. But how did you choose which varieties to plant on the different parcels that you own?
I think there are historical reasons why these varieties are here. So they are here since a few hundred years. And this is also the reason why we replanted a lot of Blaufränkisch on the Leiterberg. And I think Blaufränkisch can express schist and limestone in a perfect way. And of course, also the Pinot varieties on the other side. So Pinot Blanc, but also Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And yeah, all these varieties we're using on the Leiterberg. And we also planted a little bit of Traminer, because it also has a great tradition here. And I think it fits perfect because it has a thick skin, small bunches, and a great expression. And it fits also perfect for skin fermentation. And when I go back to my grandfather's way of working, they did a lot of skin contact because they needed a lot of time to work with their small press. They picked very slowly, and they let the grapes for a long time standing around and standing in the press. And so sometimes a few days, so they started to ferment on the skin. And so these wines, these had a natural resilience also against oxidation and a good potential. And now we are coming back more to this old traditional way of winemaking.
Could you describe the Austrian wine consumption trends? What influences do the consumers have on the wines you produce, the quantities you made and continue to make, and any other points important to us better understanding how the winery's philosophy integrates with the consumer's demand?
Yeah, the Zweigelt is still the most important grape variety. If we're talking about red wine, and we're still a red wine estate because it's 85% of the production. But the Austrians, they like this really opulent and yeah, sometimes oaky and sweet style of Zweigelt. But I prefer this, as I mentioned before, this very pure and yeah, with higher acidity sometimes and saltiness in the wine. And so actually we lost some market shares in Austria, and our export was increasing over the last 3 to 5 years. And I think this is an ongoing process. So because it will take a longer time. I mean, there are some natural wine lovers in Austria. It's the young scene in Vienna. It's an urban thing where it's just starting. So it's not starting in Tyrol, it's starting in Vienna and the big cities. And it will increase. And there are some wine merchants, they're specializing in natural wine, and also just a few wine bars focusing on natural wine in Vienna. But it's a niche in the market. And I think we need this niche in every country in the world. And so this is the reason why we are exporting to, I think, 33 countries now. And our export rate is up to 50%. And yeah, it was 20% a few years ago. So there was a big conversion going on. And I'm really happy about, because this kind of diversification is also important. And I don't want to follow the market. I think it's more interesting for me to develop the market and to get the consumers, to reach consumers. They are really convinced that they like the wine.
Well, consumers follow a lot what is written about natural wine in all of the magazines and the different forms of press. And natural wine is a hot topic for debate within the wine industry. Would you classify yourself as a natural winemaker? And how do you interpret the definition of natural wine?
There's an easy definition, I think. Nothing added and nothing removed. That's a definition of natural wine. Of course, using a little bit of sulfur can be a debate under winemakers. But yeah, I'm not. It's not a dogma for me. So if it's necessary, I have the feeling we should use a little bit of sulfur. We will use, because I don't want to have mousiness in the wine or too much volatile acidity. Sometimes it's nice to have freshness of VA, especially for Traminer. But yeah, I prefer to have this expression of nature, and doing less is closer to nature and to express what nature gives you. I think this is the right definition of natural wine.
If we could speak about the different organizations that Heinrich Winery is a member of, there are quite a few. So you are a member of Panobel, of Premium Wine Estates of Austria, of Respekt, and Demeter. If you could outline what those 4 organizations are and how they define the winery.
The local association, Panobile, we started in 92. It's a bunch of friends, and we decided we want to create image for the area. And it was the red wine, the red Panobile, which was famous at that time. And later on, we also started with white Burgundy varieties. But yeah, creating a typical red wine of the area to build up their reputation, that was the goal. And it's still an association which is working, like sharing experience and tasting together. And yeah, next week we will have this final, what we call final tasting of the Panobile 19, which is a blind tasting for all the members. And everybody has to say yes to every wine, which is important because every member of the group has to stand behind every wine, so has to accept the quality of. And I think this process of discussing and also the cellar tastings, what we are doing. So we are visiting all the 9 cellars after harvest, and everybody's sharing his projects and tasting sometimes out of the barrel. And this is very important for me to be member of this local group and to develop the area in the right way. And yeah, Premium Estates of Austria is a marketing and sales organization with 5 estates from different regions, well-known estates like Fred Leumer from Kaptal, Wieninger from Jena with Heisan Neumann, so 2 wineries now, and Sattler from Styria. So we are representing all the famous wine regions from Austria. So there's a big advantage for an importer who can take 4 regions from one hand. And Demeter and Respekt are both biodynamic organizations. We are founding member of Respekt, and together with Fred Leumer and 13 other famous wineries. And it was an international group starting this. So there was Manico from Alto Adige, and there was also from one winery from France and Franz Wening in Hungary. And we started just with wine. And some years ago, I decided to add also animals to the winery, and also we have some forest and fruit orchards. So that was the reason why we thought Demeter is a worldwide organization implementing all the other aspects of agriculture, and also more anthroposophical point of views, yeah, it's maybe the more holistic association.
And the last question we have is about the ageability of both the white and the Zweigelt. And I know you did touch on that during the tasting, but if you could review that for us, please.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, 5 to 10 years for the naked white. I mean, we're talking about an entry-level white wine, but I think there is a good potential and aging ability and good structure in the wine. So working and playing with this tannin structure, and it's only the 2% of muscat which is skin fermented in this way, but it's adding this really fresh structure, and it's not all about acidity. It's also the phenolic elements which are keeping the freshness in the wine. And I'm really surprised how young the 16 Zweigelt tastes, and so I think you can keep it for another 10 to 15 years without any problem. And that also a good reason for that is the glass stopper, so that keeps the wine really fresh, and there is no oxygen damage.
There are 2 additional wines that are available in the DC market, or became available a little too late for this presentation, but I would love if you could take a moment to speak about the 16 Blaufränkisch and the 18 Red.
Yeah, the Blaufränkisch, actually this is 17 vintage, where we are now, and the Red, which is our entry-level red wine. It's a blend of Zweigelt, Blaufränkisch, and St. Laurent, and made quite in the same way as Zweigelt or Blaufränkisch. So we do this fermentation in the inox tanks and wooden vats, and only 2 weeks. So we reduced the maturation time over the past 5 years, and because we realized if we do less extraction, the wine is more elegant, and we don't want to have this kind of dry tannins in the finish. So that was a general movement to more elegance and freshness in our wine. So picking earlier and also moving to the Leiterberg side brought more freshness to our classic Blaufränkisch, to the Blaufränkisch 16, and it is a cooler vintage, so acidity level is a bit higher, and I think there is, more time to go with this wine than with the 17 vintage, because 17 was the warmer vintage, and I think this is more open now compared to the 16 vintage. The 16, there is more spiciness and more herbal character compared to the 17.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for this incredible presentation and introduction to your winery and your beautiful wines. Do you have any final thoughts to share with us before we say goodnight?
Yeah, we hope that this COVID crisis will end very soon, and that we will get out of this and come back to happiness in life. And I think wine is connecting people all over the world, and that's the nicest part of our job. Thank you for listening and watching.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks to all watching for your interest in the great wines of Austria. We encourage everyone to visit our website calendar at corkandfork.co to view the Austrian wine events we are hosting with some of the region's greatest producers, like the one we had this evening, Heinrich. Thanks again to all. I'm going to end the meeting for everyone, and I wish everyone a lovely evening. Thank you so much. Good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.